Chapter 5 of Tractate Pesachim starts a lengthy discussion on the exact laws of the Paschal offering, the Karban Pesach as it was called, which was brought during the times of the temple as one of the types of animal offerings for the altar by the holiday of Passover. The first Mishnah says, every day by the temple there were two offerings, known as the Talmud offerings, which were offered in the temple in the morning and in the afternoon. The timing of these is relevant, as basically the only type of offering brought after the afternoon Talmud offering was the Passover offering. The afternoon Talmud offering was normally slaughtered at 8.5 hours into the day and offered at 9.5 hours. Before Passover, it was slaughtered at 7.5 hours and offered at 8.5 hours, be it a weekday or a Shabbos. If it was a Friday, it's slaughtered at 6.5 hours and offered at 7.5 hours. The Passover offering is always brought after this. The Gemara cites and debates some sources for these points. There's also disagreement on the variance between the regular timing and the Shabbos timing. Some say it's this, some say they're the same time based on concern if the meat will spoil or not. These opinions and timings are further debated. There are also additional sources brought for the other points, and it goes through some of the order of the services in the temple, which are discussed. There are other verses which are debated. New Mishnah. If you slaughter the Paschal offering with improper intent, such as that it should be for a different type of offering, or did any of the animal's blood reception or throwing or otherwise with the wrong intent, or if you began with the proper intent and then switched to a different incorrect intent, for instance intending to bring a Paschal offering and then switching mentally that it should be for a Shlamim offering instead, or started with the incorrect intent and switched to the correct intent, for instance that it should be a Shlamim offering, and then you switch to that it should be for a Paschal offering, the offering is invalid. The Gemara debates the circumstance of these improper intents as to what exactly is going on, if it's an improper intent that switched in the middle of one offering, or he had two different intents during two offerings. There are many sources brought debating which it's referring to. It ends off unresolved. What about during the rest of the year? The animal of a Paschal offering could be validly brought as a Shlamim offering. So what's the law if you express intent for both types of sacrifices over there? Some say yes, and the logic is debated. What about by the rest of the year if this offering is slaughtered with the incorrect intent as to the owner? A comparison is drawn to the improper intent of sacrifice, which is disallowed by the Passover offering, but is fine by the rest of the year, so too with the correct intent of the owner. But that's actually rejected after some debate, and we say that an improper intent of the ownership of the sacrifice invalidates the offering by the rest of the year. New Mishnah. Some further improper intents that invalidate a Paschal offering. Slaughtering it for people who can't eat it, for people not registered on it, for people without a circumcision, for somebody with ritual impurity. So by all these, it's invalid. If you slaughtered it with intent for it to be both for a valid person and also for one of these invalid people, it's valid. If you slaughter the offering before midday, it's invalid, as the verse says, in the afternoon. If it's slaughtered before the afternoon Talmud offering, it's actually still valid, so long as the blood of this offering is being stirred until the point that the Talmud offering's blood is thrown. But if you throw the Paschal offering's blood first, it's nevertheless still valid. The Gemara cites further sources for these points. If the Paschal offering was brought for circumcised people, but it was also intended that an uncircumcised person should be atoned through the throwing of the blood, there's disagreement if this is valid or not, based on whether the secondary intent works. It's debated further. Further points on laws regarding uncircumcised individuals in this offering are clarified. There's also a story where a rabbi asked to be taught some teachings and requested to be told the difference between a Paschal offering that was offered for its own sake and also not for its own sake, where it's invalid, and an offering that was brought both for people that can and cannot eat it, where it is valid. So he was told 4 differences. By the offering also not being for its own sake, the invalidation is on the sacrifice itself. You cannot identify which is the prohibited portion. It's relevant during all 4 services of the bringing of the offering, and it applies to both communal and individual offerings, all unlike an offering that was also brought for the wrong person. One of the things the rabbi also asked to be taught was about the book of Yochanan, an exposition on the book of Chronicles, which was forgotten, and it says, therefore the strength of the sages was weakened. There are further points on this topic discussed. New Mishnah. If the Paschal offering is slaughtered while you're in possession of chametz, that's a violation of the negative commandment, as the verse says, you shall not slaughter the blood of my sacrifice over chametz. Rabbi Yehuda says that this would also apply to the Talmud offering on this day. Rabbi Shimon holds that if the Paschal offering is properly slaughtered while you own chametz, you're liable, but if it's brought with improper intent, not for the sake of this offering, then you'd be exempt. And all other sacrifices on this day, if slaughtered while you have chametz, you're exempt. During Passover itself, if the Paschal offering is slaughtered with intent to be a Paschal offering while you have chametz, you can't even bring this offering at that time, so you'd be exempt. But if it was intended to be a different offering, or you actually slaughtered a different offering on Passover itself while you have chametz, you're liable. The only exception to this would be a chatas offering that was slaughtered not for its own sake, as such an offering is just invalid anyways. The Gemara clarifies an opinion that you're only liable if the chametz in question belonged to the slaughterer, or to the thrower of the blood, or to one of the members of the group that's bringing this offering. There's debate if this applies just inside the temple courtyard or not, possibly based on an interpretation of a verse, or possibly as the only warning you can give a person in this regard, as you don't know what chametz they may own in their house is a questionable warning, and they disagree about the effectiveness about such a warning. Some actually do say that the argument is over the verse, and it's debated further. The other points are also qualified. There are further points on these offerings discussed. New Mishnah. The Paschal offering was slaughtered in 3 groups. As the verse says, the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall slaughter it. Those 3 imply 3 groups. The first group would enter, the courtyard doors were shut, the shofar was blown, the Kohanim stood in rows holding silver and gold bowls, depending on the row, which were cone-shaped so that the bowls couldn't be placed down and have the blood congeal. Yisrael would slaughter the animal, and the Kohen would receive the blood, and it would be handed down until it was thrown by the base of the altar wall. The second and third groups did the same. They then said the Hallel prayer as the offerings were being finished. If it was still going on, they'd say it a second or a third time, although they never were slow enough that they finished a third Hallel prayer. The same process of the weekdays was done on Shabbos, although the sages disagreed with the fact that they'd rinse the courtyard, and the fact that they'd fill up cups of blood from the courtyard floor, which they'd throw on the altar. It also goes through how they suspended and flayed the animals and a few of the remaining particular steps. The Gemara further goes through the step-by-step process of the services of this offering, and these points are discussed further. There are some additional qualifications on these points as to the exact process and steps of this offering service, and that's the end of Chapter 5. Chapter 6 of Tractate Pesachim further deals with the laws of the bringing of the Paschal offering, specifically when the day of its offering, in the times of the temple, the 14th of the month of Nisan, just before the holiday of Passover, falls out on a Shabbos. The first Mishnah says, these are the steps of this offering that override the Shabbos restrictions: the slaughtering of the animal, the throwing of its blood on the altar, the michoi, the removal of remaining waste from its intestines, and the burning of the fat on the altar. The steps that do not override Shabbos, as they can and therefore must be postponed until after Shabbos, are the roasting and the rinsing of its intestines. Also the carrying of the offering to the temple, bringing it from outside a Tehum boundary, and severing of a blemish like a wart or similar, so it can be offered, do not override Shabbos, as they can be done before Shabbos starts. Others disagree, and Rabbi Akiva ends by saying his opinion that any form of work that could have been done before Shabbos does not override Shabbos, but the slaughter of the animal, which can't be done prior, can be done on Shabbos. The Gemara brings sources to prove the allowance of slaughtering the Paschal offering on a Shabbos. There are further similar laws discussed. It goes on like this for a bit, and based on one of our sources, it says that wisdom will desert the haughty and angry. There are many instances from the Torah quoted to prove related points. There are points brought in regards to sources for the offering of the Paschal and the Talmud offerings on Shabbos. It also discusses points on bringing these offerings while impure. Obviously, if you've contracted ritual impurity, you can't bring the Paschal offering, and will instead need to wait until the second opportunity, by Pesach Sheni, to bring this offering a month later. However, an impure congregation, impure from a corpse specifically, can bring this offering on this day. It also mentions some laws on an impure individual, from leprosy impurity and laws in regards to them leaving their encampment. These laws and points on different forms of impurity are further discussed. This goes on a bit further, and it gets back to the parts of the Paschal offering. It says michoi, the cleaning of its intestines. Some say this step specifically means poking the intestines with a knife to drain them. Some say it means actually scraping out the waste with a knife, and they cite verses which imply like their opinions, and related verses which talk about how the righteous will resurrect the dead by Mashiach's coming, which will apply both to Jewish people and also non-Jewish people who will have greatly extended lives. There are many verses cited and discussed on this topic. The other parts of the Paschal service, the removal of blemishes, and the others are further qualified. It also talks about the great joy that the Torah scholars would learn Torah with, and some related points. The remaining points on the other steps of the sacrifice are further qualified. There are additional points on impurity and discussion of Rabbi Akiva's ending opinion that preliminaries for actions can't be done on Shabbos if they could have been done prior, who some do say we rule like. New Mishnah. In addition to the Paschal offering brought on this day of the 14th of Nisan, they also brought the holiday offering, called the Chagiga offering. If the Paschal offering is brought on a weekday, the people involved are all pure, and it's not large enough that everybody's going to be full after eating it, that's when you'd also bring the Chagiga offering. If the Paschal offering is brought on Shabbos, or there's a lot of it, or the people are impure, we don't bring a Chagiga offering. The Chagiga offering can be brought from cattle, sheep, or goats, from male or female animals, and can be eaten for 2 days and a night on the 14th, that night, and on the 15th. The Gemara discusses point in the source of this discussion, and that the Chagiga offering on the 14th of Nisan is not actually obligatory. So this and a few additional laws are discussed, along with a scriptural comparison between the Paschal offering and the Chagiga offering on the 14th by Passover. These points are further qualified. We also cite some disagreement if this Chagiga offering overrides Shabbos or not, which is discussed. There are some additional points on types of holiday offerings, and these are further discussed. New Mishnah. We said there's a special exception to slaughter the Paschal offering on Shabbos. So according to some, if you bring a Paschal offering and slaughter it with improper intents, intending that it should be a different offering or slaughter the wrong animal, that's an inadvertent violation of the laws of Shabbos, and now you're liable to actually bring a Chatas offering. If you slaughter the correct animal, but one which wasn't consecrated as a Paschal offering, it was consecrated as a different offering, it's an argument if you're liable or exempt. The logic of these opinions is disputed. Some other intents that would make this an improper offering, and if offered on Shabbos, therefore liable, is if it's offered for people who are not registered for the animal, or for an uncircumcised person, or for an impure person. If it was for one of those cases, and also a permissible individual too, then you'd be exempt. Also, if you slaughter the Paschal offering on Shabbos and after the animal was found to have a blemish, you're liable for violating the Shabbos, and if there's a physical defect found inside the animal, then you'd be exempt. If the offering was slaughtered and they found that the owner of the offering had withdrawn from it, or they died, or had become impure, then you're exempt, as you couldn't have known about that. The Gemara qualifies specifics about these cases. These points and some additional on laws of impurity are discussed further. There is some further qualification in regards to the laws of Shabbos. It goes further and discusses some additional cases if the person bringing the offering passes away in the middle or withdrew. Some say it becomes a shlamim offering and can be immediately burnt, according to one opinion. It's discussed. And that's the end of chapter 6.